Hello and welcome back to the MRX Lab podcast, the show from FlexMR, where this year we'll be investigating how research and insight can make a big impact on the important topics that shape our daily lives. I'm thrilled for this episode to be joined by Shari Alyse, America's Joy Magnet and reporter for the Art and Science of Joy, plus Andrew Cannon, co-founder of the Art and Science of Joy. Welcome both of you to the show.
Thank you so much, Chris, for having us.
Yeah, real pleasure to be here, Chris.
It's awesome to be here with you both. Really appreciate your time today. Now, before we get into things, it is becoming a little bit of a tradition to ask our guests, along with a brief introduction, to share their professional heroes or role models. So, Shari, can I come to you first? Can you tell us a bit about yourself and who that professional hero or role model would be for you?
Absolutely. So whenever someone asks me about myself, the first thing I always want to say is joy, or sing. Really, for me, if we're going to talk about profession-wise, I am a speaker. I'm an author. I am, as you said, known as America's Joy Magnet. And most importantly, why we're here and that I'm so excited, I am the official Joy reporter for the Art and Science of Joy, A Year of Joy. And for me personally, my journey with joy really has led me to this place. It comes from a background of trauma, which really had me disconnected from myself. And just finding that journey back to myself is really what has, I feel, been my life purpose. And then sharing that now with others, which comes to your question about who my professional role model is. And for me, it has always been, since I was 7 years old, Oprah. And I say that because she was the first person who, as myself as a child, actually at 12, who spoke openly about her trauma. And what that showed for me was that, because I felt very alone, it was in the 1980s, no one was talking about it. And so it was the first time that I had heard that. And so what that just showed for me was what was possible for me, no matter circumstances of my life. So Oprah is it.
Yeah, what a fantastic role model to have.
Yes.
And she's really been going for such a long time as well. We forget that, she was doing what she was doing before anyone else was, really, the original.
Yep. And she's walked away to make space for me now. That's what I say.
And Andrew, how about you? Can you give us a brief introduction to yourself and who that role model might be for you?
Absolutely, Chris, absolutely. So Andrew Cannon, spent almost all my career in the market research and insight space, mainly on the agency side, but also dabbling a little bit on the client side, as well as over the last 10 years or so running something called the GRBN, the Global Research Business Network, which is the global trade federation for the market research industry. So my career's been very much in that sector. And then about 3 years ago, I made the jump to joy, so to speak. So jumping ship from, maybe the corporate world, as one consider it, into not only finding my joy, but then working on a business, the Art and Science of Joy, of how we can bring joy to as many other people as possible. So I suppose my heroes in the professional sense are anybody that's dared to work their purpose, right? To find out what their purpose is and then make that into their work. And really it's all the individuals doing it rather than one particular person. But I will point out, as a group, I'm really enamored by our Joy superpower partners, who each one of them has decided really to live a life of service and help others find joy through such things as gratitude, optimism, physical exercise, kindness, many different ways people can find joy. And these people have decided to make that their purpose, their work, and they inspire me so much. And if I have to name two people, I will name Rochelle Lawson, who's our expert this week on purpose, and I will name Kurt Mekatante, who's our expert on freedom. And both of those have been really inspirational to me over the last year or so as we built the year of joy, to find my purpose and then to do it with a life of freedom.
Oh, fantastic. And, great to be on that journey with other people who have found their purpose as well. I'm sure our listeners have probably pieced together by now, but what we are here to talk about today is the year of joy. And Andrew, you and I spoke about this before it launched last year. And I do want to check in on that and give kind of an update on what's been happening. But before we get to that and some of your superpowers and what's coming up in the year of joy for the rest of 2023, I want to start with a big question. And that is, we've said the word joy a lot already, but what is it and why is it important?
Very good question, Chris. And I think, at one level, it means many things to many different people, and that's okay. So if people have their own definition of what joy is, I'm going to be the last person to tell them that they're wrong. Whatever works for them, people should use, in my opinion. For us, it works on two levels. On one level, it's a concept at which we call it's a state of being. It's not an emotion from our perspective. It really is a deeper state of being that you could have an equivalent in a way to similar concepts like love or bliss, which what people would call a high vibration state of being. So there's an energetic feeling of joy that you can feel. So that's sort of at the concept level, which is really nice, but it's really hard to sort of make practical. So what we've done in our research is to sort of study what things underpin a joyful life, what distinguishes people who are living with a state of joy and those who aren't. And that basically boils down to four key ingredients of well-being, belonging, positive impact, and fun. Now, how people mix those will vary from person to person to what we call make their own joy cocktail. But those ingredients at that high level tend to be common. They tend to underpin joy, which enables us to create a model, a way that people can practically start to find more joy in their lives.
That's a really interesting way of thinking about it. I like the idea of breaking it down into those component parts. And the way you talk about it there reminds me of how athletes and commentators often talk about a state of flow, a state of being, which is quite hard to achieve. But I guess also it's quite easy sometimes for people to lose that, to get stuck in their own heads. Shari, what's a good way for people to find joy in their lives, to get back into that state of being?
Well, as Andrew said, it's really individual as far as, creating your own joy cocktail and finding out our recipe of those four elements or those four core ingredients. I think, everyone is individual. So for me personally, under well-being, I briefly touched on about connection to self. So that for me has been the driving force in my life to be able to always find my joy, is to slow down, is to pause. I feel like joy is fully present when we're fully present. And so it goes along with that whole state of being, that if someone is stuck in their heads, which a lot of us are, which I think is why joy is so important, to go back to that as well, because so many people are struggling with their mindset. And so to be able to just get out of that, and an easy way to do that is through breath, and easy to connect back to self. An easy way to do that is by just feeling your body physically. One of our joy superpower experts is Natalie Siston, and she talks about positive intelligence and really these reps about getting back into your physical state of being so you get out of your head. So there's so many different ways to be able to, I think, come back to self and center which when you're there, you'll always find your joy.
That's a great message. I love that. And in terms of getting back there, part of the Year of Joy project is something called the Joy Barometer. Can we talk a bit about what that is, how it works, and what people can expect from that?
Absolutely. So the Joy Barometer is basically a result of the research that we've done, as well as the research that many other people have done, which we've looked into to try and find what underpins joy. So as we mentioned, the 4 core ingredients, what the Joy Barometer does is break that down into 12 more what we would call common ingredients, which is when you look at well-being, for example, that gets split down to look at your emotional, your mental, your physical, and your spiritual well-being, for example. So across those 4 core categories or core joy ingredients, we then break it down to 12, which we then measure or allow people to self measure themselves with the Joy Barometer. And they look at it in terms of how important they consider each of these 12 ingredients to be. They evaluate their lives in terms of how much effort and time they're actually spent, what we would say, doing the work, or we like to say doing the play, into improving themselves in these 12 areas. And finally, how satisfied they are with where they currently stand in each of these 12 areas. Are they satisfied with their family life? Are they satisfied with their friends, their work? And we know that's a huge one. At the moment, a lot of people suffering or struggling to find joy through work. And so with those 3 metrics on those 12 variables, we can sort of build this grid or this overview of how people's lives are today in terms of joy. And we use an algorithm to create an overall joy score. So what people get basically when they do Joy Barometer is they get their own joy scorecard, which has not only this score, but also a visualization of how they're doing on these 12 ingredients. So for me, I like to print that off, look at it approximately once a week and just check in with myself. How am I doing this week on each of these areas? Is there some part of my life I've forgotten to put effort in, or one part of my life pulling me down at the moment? So to make it a conscious effort, and I know other people do it as a family thing, right? They can sit around and have the family talk around the dinner on Friday. Hey, how have we been this week? How have we looked after our physical well-being, for example, or the impact we're having on the planet? So it can be used in many different ways, but we find the visualization really helps people see where they are today and give them motivation to try and improve their lives tomorrow.
Definitely. I mean, it sounds like such a useful tool for people. And as we're recording now, the Joy Barometer, the Year of Joy project, has been live for a couple of months. So hopefully that's already starting to have an impact and starting to help people have those conversations. Can we talk a bit about some of the superpowers and some of the things that have happened in that time already?
Definitely. I'll continue with that one. I know Shari's ready to jump in a moment, but let me just say what's been going on over the last few weeks. So we basically started the 17th of January, opened the doors, and each week been having a different joy superpower. Now, the focus to begin with has very much been on well-being, because we know from our research that if you don't have a good sense of well-being, it's really hard to work on some of the other areas like positive impact, for example, right? It's really hard to have the energy to do that. And we feel that in people's lives at the moment when we see a lot of people stressing about things like the climate or gun laws or racial issues or diversity and inclusion, whatever the issue is. People are struggling with these mega sort of societal issues when they're sort of struggling internally as well with their own well-being, and that really doesn't give them the bandwidth to put any effort or energy into solving these problems. It makes them even more stressed and depressed and anxious. So what we're trying to do over the first few weeks is to help people start building some of their well-being muscles, so that they can get that basic sense of of joy inside of themselves, which will then give them the power to start expanding that joy to others later on during the year.
And talking of, what's coming up in the future, Shari, are you able to share some of the ingredients or superpowers you're going to be putting a spotlight on over the next couple weeks and months?
Absolutely. So this week we're excited. We have Rochelle Lawson, her superpower is all about purpose. And we talked about this right in the beginning about being able to find our purpose and having direction in our lives, because when we have that direction and we have that clarity, it's a lot easier to feel connected to ourselves and to be able to take action with those things that are important to us. Otherwise we feel directionless, and that is not a good state of being. So we have that happening this week. Upcoming, we've got self-direction. So we have freedom coming up, and then just a broader as we move along, as Andrew said, we're in the well-being stage, but then we're going to be moving more into the belonging and really community and family, and how those elements of feeling connected through a sense of belonging really ignites and elevates our joy. So we're really excited about that coming up as well. We already know that there is a loneliness epidemic in the world, and people really struggling to not only connect with one another, but again, back to the connection with self. And so this idea of knowing that there is community, knowing that we have family, or we have friends, or we have a connection with a coworker, it makes people feel less alone. And when we are in a space of not feeling so isolated with ourselves, and we have somebody to reach out to, somebody to share something with, somebody to celebrate with us, whatever that is, that, two people having that human connection, we feel that sense of belonging. We feel like we have a reason and more of a purpose. And that again, really impacts our state of being and joy.
And then we mentioned purpose there, and that's another one of your themes coming up. So Andrew, I wonder if you can share a bit about some of the ways purpose and freedom can help us create or sustain joy.
Yeah, I think the purpose one is really crucial, especially for those who are looking to elevate their sense of joy, to take it to the next level, that really taking a moment to self-reflect or to work with an expert to try and uncover what your purpose is. What are you, A, really good at, and B, how can you use what you're really good at to serve and help others, becomes, really a strong and ultimate way to really take your joy to a very high level. So it's really about, discovering what you're good at, what you love to do, and then finding a way where you can actually do that which serves mankind or the planet, whichever way you want to look at it. But you're not just doing it for selfish gain, but you're doing it for the betterment of something. So if you can align those two things, that really does manage to elevate your joy. And it's going to be fantastic working with Rochelle this week, as she's really so not only passionate about it, but she's doing it herself, and very inspirational. She'll have lots of good tips to share on how you could go about doing that. So I won't spoil it anymore, so everybody can tune into the community and get it straight from Rochelle, to be sure.
Of course.
And then freedom to me is really important, because we live in a world in many ways of boxes. Some of those boxes have been created for us by some wonderful people, either in terms of politics or in terms of work world or in terms of school or family. Whatever way we look at it, we can see a lot of boxes that we see in our lives, and we also have created a lot of boxes for ourselves out of this sense of security, which I always like to blame Mr. Maslow for giving us this concept that security has to be such a basic need, whereas I like to see security as an outcome, more or less, of many other things, such as well-being and belonging and self-actualization. If you've got strong sense of well-being, a strong sense of belonging, of being your authentic self, those two will enable you to self-actualize, to do what you love, to find your purpose, right? And once you've got that, all of a sudden you'll find you're getting wealth, you're getting attraction, and that will give you security, which will then give you the base upon which to live a life of service. So, I'd certainly challenge Mr. Maslow, if he was here today, to really consider his concept. But that's maybe another podcast.
It sounds like, we can have a whole debate on that.
Want to argue with me about how great Maslow is, I could enjoy that for sure. But freedom, on the one hand, is about courage to make your own choices, right? Courage to take responsibility for yourself and how you want to live your life. But one of the things that I particularly love about freedom, especially when I talk to our Joy superpower expert, Kurt, who's going to come on and talk about that during the Year of Joy, he corrected me very much on a misconception I had about freedom at the beginning, which is freedom is it's not about, how am I going to say this? Let's think about it as a river, right? You could think about freedom as being a very meandering, wide river, right? Because you don't have any boundaries, you don't have any control, any sort of borders or barriers. You're just being free, just floating around. Whereas Kurt said, no. Freedom is about defining your own barriers, defining your own borders, and defining them as in such a tight way that you create a strong flow of energy with your freedom, a strong flow of purpose, a strong flow of action, rather than just meander, thinking I'm free, I can float from here to there to this. Say no, use your freedom wisely, create strong banks, and then within that, you will flow with force. And that really opened my eyes to say, hey, stop meandering, think about your purpose, and then be free within that framework that you're setting for yourself. Just don't let anybody else define your banks for you. Define your own banks. And that reminds me of a great song called Banks by a band called Need to Breathe. So if you want to plug for a song, go to YouTube or your favorite music platform and listen to the song Banks, and you will feel uplifted and joyful. I can guarantee that.
And such a good way to remember that metaphor too, setting your own banks.
And they break all your mirrors if you don't.
But there is a challenge in there, I guess, and it's that it's all about putting the work in. That it's not something that maybe comes naturally. That we do have to set our own structures, and it's something I saw Shari you talk about in your TED talk about how the pursuit of happiness has actually sometimes made us unhappier. So how would you say we can find our way back? How can we pursue happiness and still be happy?
Well, I think it's important to first note that there is a difference between happiness and joy, because a lot of people use those interchangeably. And I think, as I said in my talk, this pursuit of happiness, I mean, here in America, we know we've been doing it at least since the Declaration of Independence. It's written in it. And I think that in that pursuit, psychology research shows us, as you said, that we have become unhappier. And I think it's because we've set this up as happiness as the gold standard of living. And we forget that happiness is an emotion. It's literally energy in motion. So it can't last forever. We're human. And so once we release this pressure off of ourselves that we all have to be happy all of the time and all of these external things are going to create this happiness, that's what disconnects us. That's what makes us feel isolated. That's what makes us feel stressed and anxious, because we think that we have to be somewhere else than where we actually are. And so in order to, your question, find this happiness or be happier, I think it's about acceptance. I think it's about understanding who we are and what we can and cannot do. And then with joy, Joy is about turning inward. It's not about looking at the external things to bring us joy. It's about, as I said previously, it's about being fully present with ourselves, because in that presence lies the joy. So finding those micro moments, using our core ingredients, making sure that we have created more well-being in our lives, that we're having more fun, that we are in a sense of community and belonging, that we're making a positive impact in the world. All of those things will ignite and elevate our joy.
And is there a role in there, do you think, for others? How, can we go one step further from, finding our own joy to helping other people find theirs?
I'm big on just sharing in the joy, which means, I created recently on social media a post about postponing our joy, about the fact that sometimes we feel guilty. People feel guilty about feeling joy or sharing joy when there's struggles and hardships in the world, but never has it been shown that by withholding our joy, that helps people. And so I feel like the best way to be able to help others feel joy is by showing them what is possible, is by sharing truths, being authentic, showing the journey, that even through hardships, that even through really difficult life circumstances, that you could still find those moments to be able to be grateful for that cup of coffee, finding the joy in it, taking a walk in nature, whatever that is. So that's my favorite way, and has always been, to elevate other people's joy, is by walking in it myself and sharing it.
And I suppose to a large extent, that's what the Year of Joy is helping people do, is, finding our own joy, sharing it with others, being part of that community and network, and doing it together. So I guess, Andrew, a question for you. What are your hopes for the Year of Joy? What do you hope will have happened by the end of 2023?
It's a very good question, and one that, to be honest with you, I'm not particularly focused on. Part of this project really is about setting very broad intentions and then letting go of those, and focusing our attention on the present, as Shari likes to remind us to stay present with what we're doing. So we don't have any numbers. If people looked at it as a business, we'd probably, get kicked out of business school, because we don't have goals, numeric goals, right? We deliberately said no. Whatever we come up with will be underselling the project. So, we believe that the project will attract everybody who desires to have more joy in their lives, really desires it, as you said, Chris, willing to do the work to actually get it. We believe we will attract everyone who is in that space to the best of our ability, and that will be good enough. So we're not worried about where it's going to be. So I would say, on a broad level, the intention is that we bring an increased feeling of joy to as many people as we can. Right? And whether that's one person or a million people, I don't care. It's going to be good enough, as long as we're doing the work intentionally in the moment to do our best with this project. So it's all about doing that, but at the same time, from a research perspective, it's about measuring the uplift we can have through the Joy Barometer on people's joy through this coming together as a community and intentionally living a life of joy. And if we can measure that is actually uplifting people's joy, we hope we can then go to the brands who have some bigger budgets than we do, and we can elevate this for year 2 to get the brands to really power behind us and say that, look, joy is a thing that we want to, as a brand, that we want to put our money behind, not fear. Right? Because that's the opposite of what's happening at the moment. There's a world of scarcity, and everybody's trying to create this atmosphere of fear and competition and all of these other negative things happening there. Whereas if we could get the brands to say, hey, let's put our money behind joy, I think that will create an abundance of joy beyond what we can do with our little budget. So that's our desire, is to make the Joy Barometer scores rise. So with the money, we'll say, oh, joy is a thing. I've got proof now. We got the evidence that we should invest our marketing budget in bringing more joy to the world. So let's give it to the Year of Joy folks so they can help even more people next year.
And you've brought me on, whose purpose and mission is to spread joy. So I'll continue to just shout Year of Joy from the rooftop. So that's how we're the good balance. He's all calm and cool, and this is, and I'm like, no, joy. It's awesome.
Yeah, you're really starting a movement. It sounds like, a movement towards joy and bringing as many people along as you can. I think that's admirable. I think that's amazing.
Yeah,
so
funny to add to that, we were on was it Rochester, Good Day Rochester TV show with Shari, and we just did like a 5-minute spot on like this half-hour news, whatever it is, and somebody from the community said afterwards that, do you know what, you guys were the news. That 5 minutes, the rest of it was a complete load of waste of time. There was nothing irrelevant to their lives, really. Who won the sports, who did this, who did that. But when you guys were talking about how you can add more joy to your lives, that's really the news that we should be getting through the media channels. So I thought that was very uplifting and kind of that person to see it in that way.
Amazing. Yeah, that's the kind of feedback you want. Andrew, what's the best way for someone to get involved with the Year of Joy project?
The Year of Joy, how to get involved? Probably the easiest way is to go to the artandscienceofjoy.com website, and there on the homepage you'll be able to click on a link straight away to join up, or you could go to the Year of Joy subpage if you want to find out a little bit more information before you dip your toe in. But we encourage people to dip their toe in for 2 reasons. One, it's free, so there's no obligation. When we set out to do this, it was very important to us that this was going to be a free resource for the world and not a monetary question. And the second reason is you can quit anytime. So, there's no obligation to stay for a year if it's not adding more joy to your lives. We don't want you to be on the media or on the internet doing stuff when you could go out and live more joyfully. So, if it adds value, great, be there, be part of the community. But if not, hey, go out and just be joyful. So that's probably the best way to do it. Obviously, on social media, you can follow the Art and Science of Joy on different channels. So that's another way to get involved.
And of course, we'll have the links to the Art and Science of Joy and your social media channels in the show notes as well. So if anybody is looking for those links, just look in the show notes beneath this podcast. But I think that brings us about to the end of today's show. But before we do go, I just want to get one final thought from you. So Shari, if I can come to you first, what's the one thing you'd like people to remember from today's episode about joy?
I would say that to prioritize it, to prioritize yourself, your well-being, that you're worthy of enjoying your life, and that there are resources out there like the Year of Joy to be able to intentionally add that to your life and make your joy a non-negotiable.
Amazing message. And Andrew, how about you? What's the thing you'd like people to remember from today?
I think I'd like them to remember that even though joy is a state of being, that's sort of a concept that's hard to grasp, that there are common building blocks to joy. And using those building blocks, everybody can find their own joy recipe, their own ingredients that will increase their feeling of joy. So instead of getting stuck on the concept, work on the areas of their life which will add to their joy and demote the parts of their life that are detracting from their joy.
Fantastic. Shari, Andrew, thank you so much for joining me today. It has been a joy to have you. I bet you hear that all the time.
Never gets old. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And-
It's been wonderful to talk with you today.
And thank you to everybody listening as well. We'll be back next month along with Thomas Mathar from Aegon UK to discuss how Centres for Research Excellence are changing the way that brands generate and use data. Until then, I've been your host, Chris Martin, and this has been the MRX Lab.